Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples integrated recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice and sugarcoating, no platitudes or bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. There is a meme you may have seen that comes from the movie Split that has always kind of made me chuckle. Someone does something totally out of character, and the meme says, "That wasn't me, that was Patricia." And for years, I used that joke. I still kind of use that if I attack the refrigerator at 2 o'clock in the morning and have a bunch of sugar and stuff that I probably should not be having, that was Patricia. Or I can think back to when I was a daily binge drinker. That was shorthand for my blackout behavior, waking up and thinking, well, apparently somebody else had done all of this last night. And this joke lands, I think, because it points at something real, even though I'm exaggerating it. You don't need to have addiction, dissociation, or a diagnosis for this meme or experience to make sense. Have you ever noticed a version of you that seems to grab the wheel of your car? Maybe the one that sends a text message that you knew you shouldn't send, or texts the ex who you know is toxic for you. The one that escalates an argument past where it needs to go, or the one that maybe shuts down, goes cold, or disappears if somebody is getting too emotionally close. Or some people have a part that just wants to burn everything down and start all over. And sometimes when you look back on these things, you think, that was Patricia, or like, that didn't even feel like me. And so we're not talking about character flaws. We're not talking about lack of insight. We are talking about how the system works, whether you like it or not, which is that when something inside of you senses threat, like betrayal, humiliation, loss of control, anything like that, the nervous system does not pause for reflection. It hands the keys to whatever internal strategy has worked in the past. And so today I'm going to speak through an internal family systems lens, IFS. And in IFS, those strategies are called parts. And in real life, it looks like somebody else took over and you are explaining the damage. So today we're going to talk about IFS, parts work, and Patricia. Stay with this car analogy for a moment, because it actually explains more than some people may realize. Many of us walk around assuming there is more than one part of us that is behind the wheel, one set of values, one consistent decision maker, but that's not how it really works. Think of it more like the movie Inside Out, all those different parts of the character. This car is crowded, and different passengers lean forward depending on the situation. So there is a version of you that's calm and reasonable when things are going well. And there may be a passenger in the car that is scanning for threat the second that anything feels off. There might be one that really wants closeness and then jams on the brakes the second that closeness feels like it is too dangerous or too risky. Whichever one reacts fastest in the moment tends to usually grab the wheel. And that doesn't mean that you're unstable. It means that your system is responsive. And when we talk about parts work, I am not talking about pathology like dissociative identity disorder and multiple personalities. That's not what this is. IFS does not frame any of this as dysfunction. It frames it as organization, that your internal world is structured around survival, not consistency. And some of those parts learned to drive early. And you ever seen a early driver? They usually drive fast. They tailgate. They are dangerous. They don't use their turn signals. Some of those parts learned under pressure, and they learned based on what works. One of the simplest and most useful shifts in IFS is changing how you describe what is happening inside you. And this may sound like semantics. It may sound like it's just words, but hear me out. Instead of saying, I am angry, you say, a part of me is angry. Instead of, I am shutting down, it is, a part of me wants to disappear right now. And that shift isn't about distancing, it's about accuracy, because when you say, I am, then you're collapsing your entire identity into one state. But if you say a part of me, then you're acknowledging something that's important, that there is more than just this one moment. And that creates enough space to notice instead of drown, enough to slow those reflexes and to stop handing the keys over automatically to your parts. And this is where I'm intentionally not asking you to fix anything, but just notice. Who's leaning forward right now? Who's tightening the grip? And for a long time, anger is what drove my car, many years more than I want to admit. And a lot of days I kept that reasonably contained, controlled, rational. And then a senior citizen might be blocking the entrance to Walmart, sanitizing their cart so that nobody can get around them, and a less healed version of me from a decade ago may have been yelling at this old lady, hey, you're not the only person here, get out of the way. Not something I'm particularly proud of, but I would call that a part that had jumped in momentarily, a bad driver. And so I'm going to fast forward that enter peer-led recovery and being able to talk about things like this, and it was labeled a character defect, so I would shame it away or try to be more cognizant of it, or ask God to remove it for me, and to try to be more mindful, I suppose. But stuffing never seemed to really resolve this. So fast forward, things became a little bit more controlled or rational, and then I would hit this familiar intersection, usually involving if I would have thoughts about old betrayals or unfair authority dynamics, and suddenly the brakes to the car are gone. I can think of a couple of times that I would go to a family dinner and share thoughts about things that were going on in my life, and when I would look at my parents, I could just see alarm on their faces about me speaking openly, a little bit too openly, like the whole room shifted. And I can think of my dad saying, like, you have got to let that stuff go. That anger is killing you. And if you've experienced anger to this extent, like a lot of the clients that I have worked with, nothing fuels anger more and faster than being told that it's wrong or that it shouldn't exist. When I was in grad school, I was pretty dismissive of IFS. It's not a framework that is taught in most of the classes, but I can recall a student who did a demonstration of this because his wife was an IFS therapist. And different season of my life, I was still kind of law enforcement brained, and I really underestimated how helpful it could be. But fast forward years later, I was a therapist and I was in EMDR training, a different season of my life, a lot more understanding of emotions and the impact of emotional wounds and trauma and all of that. And in EMDR, we were asked to process or to work on something. Maybe not something real heavy, but to show how EMDR can be helpful in changing negative core beliefs and processing stuff that still needs to be worked on. And so I brought just a small piece of that anger into the room. This is something that I see a lot of clients do, is that they might kind of test the safety of the room with me to see is it safe to actually be authentic, or do I need to kind of can this and keep it superficial? So I let just a little bit of that anger out just to see what would happen. And this EMDR trainer, I had no idea did IFS. I didn't really know anything about IFS. And when that part came out, I was expecting her to kind of give me a sideways look like, oh my God, you're a therapist? What's wrong with you? But instead, it was welcomed. And she was like, yes, like she wanted to hear that. And it was the first time that I had ever heard the phrase, which is the name of a book in IFS, no bad parts. Not a slogan, but as a boundary. Even the parts of you that escalate, the parts that want revenge, the parts that burn the world down in addiction. And when that anger wasn't met with fear, it didn't intensify. It nearly immediately softened. Not because any of the situations in my life had been fixed, but because finally somebody heard it and didn't slap a character defect on it or tell me that it was wrong. And if you have lived through betrayal or powerlessness, anger can become the most qualified driver in the system because it moves fast, it narrows focus, and it treats conversations like courtrooms. But underneath it is a much quieter question. How do I make sure that things like this don't happen again? Sometimes that answer sounds like more control or distance or revenge or retaliation. But when I could shift that to a part of me wants revenge right now, the tunnel vision cracked. So here is an organizing principle of IFS that may sound paradoxical. Every part, even the worst ones, have a positive intention. Not always positive outcomes, but positive intention. Anger tries to protect and guard you from violations. Fear prevents repetition. Hesitation may be remembering past consequences. And shame often tries, very clumsily, to keep you from being rejected. And that part that wants revenge, it's not evil, it's a power restoration strategy. It's something that shows up when inside you felt flattened and you never wanted to feel that way again. And you don't have to like the strategy to understand the mission. IFS describes two broad types of protective parts. Some parts work ahead of pain. They anticipate, plan, monitor, and control. And their belief is simple: if I can just stay vigilant enough, then nothing gets through and I won't be hurt. Those parts are called manager parts. And then you have other parts that respond after pain hits, and they move fast to shut that down through intensity, numbing, escape, or impulsive relief. Those parts are called firefighter parts. Now, I'm ex-law enforcement. I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen what a house looks like after the firefighters are done with it, but usually it ain't pretty. But the fire's out. So, one prevents, one extinguishes. Both are adaptive, and neither is random. I want to slow this next section down a little bit because there's another part in IFS that the verbiage can get a little bit misunderstood. In many recovery spaces, especially early on, people are taught that this word self is a very bad word. Like, self cannot be trusted, that your best thinking got you here, that jumping into your emotions was dangerous. And so there's a lot of self as like the enemy in 12-step culture. And that framing exists for a reason, because for many people who are in early addiction recovery, they need a lot of structure, they need external guidance, and they need limits on their impulsive thinking. So this approach does save lives, and I'm not even trying to argue that, but what I am interested in is clarity. Because in IFS, what is often labeled as selfish or ego-driven or self-seeking is really a collection of different protective parts, reactive strategies that took over when something felt overwhelming or unsafe. That is not what self is. In IFS, self looks very different. It's steady, it's curious. Self doesn't rush to defend or explain. It doesn't need to convince anybody. And I had a moment recently where this distinction became very real for me. I had shared something deeply personal about my own IFS work, writing that reflected genuine growth and freedom for me, and the response from somebody who played a really important role in my early recovery was dismissive of it. It didn't resonate for him, it didn't fit his framework, and that stirred something in me. There was a part that wanted to explain, a part that wanted to be understood, a part that wanted to justify why this is good work. And then the meaningful moment wasn't the reaction, it was what happened next. I didn't argue, I just noticed my pull to want to justify, and I chose not to, because that's what self-leadership looks like. I don't need to prove growth, I don't need to defend a framework, and I don't need agreement for me to stay grounded. It was simply the recognition that different models can serve different people at different stages, and that something can be life-saving in one season and then limiting in another. It doesn't make anything or anybody wrong. For me, self-leadership means trusting that internal calm that allows parts to speak without running the entire system. And it means staying anchored without needing to be mirrored. It's not rebellion or superiority, and it's not ego, it's differentiation. So, this week, if you notice a strong emotion that shows up, pause and ask yourself, who's driving right now? What part? Don't analyze, just notice. Then say, a part of me feels blank, or a part of me wants to blank. And then ask, can self take the wheel for a moment? You're not kicking anybody out of the car. You're offering internal leadership. And if this resonated, perhaps it's because you have lived it, that moment where a part drove and you were left explaining the aftermath of the crash. This work is not about perfection. It's about awareness and leadership. You don't need to get rid of your passengers. You want to understand them. And then you learn how to drive. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we are all capable of growing past them. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. And in the meantime, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.